you in a minute here. I'm going to make sure it's recording. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Solid Source for allowing us to do this. I think this is great. I think there's going to be some great information shared today. And I want to introduce a couple people that are on the call. Charmaine LeMay, all of you guys know Charmaine, your sales executive for Solid Source. And I'm Erin Schiller, and then with us is Janine Norvick and Ashley Farrington. Janine has been in the escrow business, I want to say 30 years now, right, Janine? Yes.
31.
Yeah. She's a certified senior escrow officer, and she is on every type of transaction you can imagine out there, from short sales, REOs. We don't want to go back to the REO days for sure. And then Miss Ashley Farrington, who's been in the business 17 years. Yes, Janine? Yeah. Ashley. Okay. So we've got a combined experience of what, 47 years? That's awesome. And they are at our Midtown office on Plumbgate. If you guys know where Plumbgate is, we just opened a Midtown office and they have a new location there. So make sure to come and visit if you'd like to. So today we're going to have Janine and Ashley talking a little bit about escrow best practices for a successful closing. But what we'd like to know from you, and a few of you have sent us some emails, but what would you like to hear about today? Because I know Janine and Ashley have a list of things that they want to cover, but is there anything specifically that you would like us to talk about today? You can put it in the chat bar. If you guys can, that would be a lot easier than trying to open up the mic. But if you'd like to go into the chat and mention any questions, I think that would be a great way. And then we can kind of go from there. Is everybody good with that? Okay. Okay, so Janine and Ashley, do you want to start and kind of talk about some of the top things in our real estate market right now and what you're seeing on your escrow desk and things that real estate agents for a successful closing can help you close that deal more successfully? Share with us, what would you like to know?
Yes, something that came up very recently, which is why we're putting it on the list as number one, is power of attorneys. The minute you hear, be it your buyer or your seller, use that word, oh, I have a power of attorney, stop immediately. And most of the time it's fine, but we're going to need to know why that power of attorney is being used, what's wrong with the person who gave it to that buyer or seller, why can they not sign of their own volition, who has the original, and we're going to need to review it. It really should, per NRS, be subject and limited to just the property that we're talking about. And a lot of times it's not, it's just a general or a durable. So then we have to review it. When was it notarized? Who notarized it? Was the person able to sign it at the time? If they're signing a power of attorney, what is the reason that they're giving this power to this other person? So the minute you hear somebody say, oh, I'm signing on behalf of somebody else because I have the power of attorney, we just need to see a copy of it immediately, find out where the original is, and find out why that person cannot sign of their own volition. A lot of times it's fine, but we ran into one recently where, unfortunately, the contract was docu-signed by what appeared to be both sellers. Well, then we find out 2 days before closing that one of the sellers is incapacitated. And, oh no, but there's a power of attorney. Then we find, we keep getting, oh no, you can't get them. He's got COVID. He's in the hospital. So I said, well, we'll have to extend. And then they said, oh, well, he's out of the hospital. He's in convalescence, but he can't sign. He's incapacitated. These would be things that would be much, much better for us to know sooner rather than later, because you can imagine that was a mad scramble to try and get that closed, finding out these facts afterwards. And of course, the concern is left of who docu-signed that contract. So I think an agent's putting themselves on a little bit of level of liability there, that contract wasn't signed by the seller. It's signed on behalf of him, but not using their capacity as a power of attorney. It was just clicked. So all fine and dandy 9 times out of 10, but it could be a huge problem and could cause a huge delay. So just let escrow know sooner rather than later. If you hear the words power of attorney, stop.
Right. Anybody have any comments or questions about power of attorneys? You can use the chat or you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. All right.
Anyone? No?
I've got one. Homeowners Association docs.
Okay.
Ooh, good one.
That was Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. Yeah, huge confusion always on this. Contractually and statutorily, the seller has to purchase what is called the resale package. And yes, it can be expensive. And 9 times out of 10, the Homeowners Association has contracted with a website to obtain those documents, and they require payment via credit card. So if you're taking a listing and you know it's in a homeowners association, tell your seller right up front to anticipate this expense on their credit card. You're going to look like you've got it all together. You're going to look like the better agent. And they're well ahead of it. So when we send these links to them, they're not surprised. And sometimes, guys, these links are, you know, $500-600 just to get the resale package. What we find is sellers will respond and say, oh, no, we're splitting the transfer fee, or we're splitting the setup fee. Yes, you are. But in order for us to find out what the transfer fee is or what the setup fee is, that package has to be sent to us. It includes a statement from the HOA that says, okay, in order to transfer this from seller to buyer, we're going to want a transfer fee, account processing fee, a setup fee, capital contributions, whatever that individual homeowners association requires to transfer the property from the seller to the buyer. So just be the best listing agent and let your sellers know right up front, okay, we're in a homeowners association. Please be prepared to receive a link that you will have to sign on to and use your credit card to pay for that package. But the seller has to do that before we can even get to the second part of the contract that tells us transfer fees and setup fees, capital contributions possibly, depending on the homeowners association. So I think it's really important that to let the seller know that right up front, because again, it's a lot of money that they're going to be asked to put on their credit card. But if they're prepared, makes it a little easier. That makes sense? Everybody's muted, so I have no idea.
They can unmute themselves, Matt.
I think it makes sense. I think the issue that comes up is when a seller doesn't pay for it. Yes. So is it ordered? Well, it may be ordered, but it's not paid for, so therefore it can't be delivered.
Right.
And
so
that was an issue that we had with an escrow is or a transaction is, you know, they never ordered it. So our buyers never had anything to look at. And so when they canceled the transaction for multiple other reasons.
Okay.
You remember, Janine.
The seller said, the seller said, I'm not giving you your earnest deposit back. And we're like, but you didn't do X, Y, and Z. And you never ordered the HOA resale package. And they said, yeah, it was ordered, but it wasn't paid for. Therefore, it wasn't delivered, which means we never received a copy.
Right.
And so, you know, the language on the contract can be a little misleading, I think, for some people.
Yeah. Right. Well, you know, so we'll get the contract, say, on Monday, and the seller really has, again, contractually and statutorily, 5 days to get that done. So we'll probably figure out on Tuesday who the homeowners association management company is, what website. We'll send that on Tuesday. The seller has 5 days to actually complete that and pay for it. We will follow up in 5 days and say, oh, you haven't done that yet. You know, let's get on that. And of course, as you all know, the homeowners association then has 10 days to get all of that information to us, followed up by another 5 days for your buyers to approve that. And so a quick closing, sometimes just because it's cash, if it's got a homeowners association, you're looking at least 20 days. Yeah, 20 days. I mean, if the seller gets right on it, or my concern for agents is when we send the documents perhaps on a Wednesday and that's when we get them, but it's a quick close and we're closing on Friday, it'll all be fine. Your buyer will sign off and say, yeah, I read everything. But I guarantee the minute they get a violation notice because they planted a tree or left a trash can out, whatever it may be, they're going to go after you as your selling agent and say, well, I never got my 5 days to approve all of this. You couldn't have expected me to have read that in 2 days. I mean, we all know how big those sets of documents can be. So just slowing down and letting everybody have their 5 days to order it, 10 days for the HOA to get it to us, and your buyer to have 5 days to approve it before we close. But yeah, we do try and follow up, Matt, and just keep hinting. You haven't done it yet. But here, I have a question actually for you, Matt. So how do you address when an agent responds to us and say, oh, well, my seller's not going to do that until all the inspections are done? My take
Well, then there needs to be an addendum.
There needs to be an addendum. Thank you. We keep throwing that out and we keep getting a pushback on it. So I was curious as to your take on that.
Yeah, it's whatever's written within the four corners of the contract. And so, there's obviously legal and statutory rights and timeframes that everybody has to follow to not breach their side of the contract.
Yeah.
And if there are any changes or additional circumstances, it needs to be outlined in an addendum and agreed to by all parties.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'll keep pushing, but I say we get a lot of kickback on that.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's very easy to say I understand the intention. But I think you understand we need written documentation and executed agreement between all parties to make changes to a contract. We can't just go off of hearsay.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got another question here. Importance of prelims. What agents should be looking for?
We were going to talk about that. Statements of information. That's a requirement that you will see on some of our title reports. And the importance of that is because there could be GI matters that our title department needs to look into. So when you see a request for a statement of information, it means that we need to look into something further in regards to the party of the transaction and to either see if it's the person that is purchasing or selling, or if it can be eliminated. Also, I think it's more or less common names like John Smith, Susan Brown. It's just we have to do a process of elimination. So we're asking for these things, not because we are trying to just be nosy. It's because there's something in the back end of the title department they're looking for. What else?
What about, ladies, what about in a prelim, we may require a copy of the trust or a copy of an LLC agreement, or there's been a death in that's showing up on the public record. Is that something, again, that we're going to need assistance from the real estate agent?
Yes. If they're selling and they own the property in a trust, as long as both trustees or the trustee is alive, we don't really need to see the whole trust agreement unless we're questioning for some reason why they're in title or how they came into title. A prelim is a story. We're telling a story of everything that's recorded on this property, and a title officer will decide we need to address this, disclose this before we can guarantee to the buyer or the buyer's lender that the title is clear and it's all good. So think of the prelim as just what affects the property right now. And we are going to guarantee to the buyer and the buyer's lender that there are no issues. It really was our seller. The seller had the right to do this. So we've got to prove all of that before we can issue our insurance policy. So again, trust for the most part, as long as the parties are alive, we won't need to see the full trust. If we've got one still with us and one's deceased, then we would need to see the full trust to prove to ourselves that that second trustee really does get the property. Just because maybe Ashley and Janine are trustees of the Norvick Farrington Trust, it doesn't mean that when I pass away, Ashley is necessarily the successor trustee. I could have given it to Matt.
You also need a death certificate.
A death certificate. Unfortunately, we have to actually prove that that
Yeah.
person is deceased, which is a little sad, but you know, we have to prove that that person really has passed away. We don't have any kind of forgery, which we insure against, or senior abuse, anything of that nature.
And that
So
goes
is
into the probate question, right?
It
So,
does somewhat, yeah.
yeah, because we, you know, one of the things is if you have a, say, husband and wife, and both of them pass away and they are in title as husband and wife as joint tenants, both of them pass. We see from our side quite a few family members coming and saying, okay, I want to sell this house. And, you know, I've got a will, or, you know, I'm the daughter or the son or whoever, but maybe they don't have a trust. So we need instruction, right? We need to be told who has the right to sell that property. If there's nothing in public record that tells us, or there's nothing to show to us, then it would go to probate, right? So that would be a case like that.
Yeah, basically a probate is a court order declaring who has the right to sell that house. Right. Having a will is great. You can pass away with a will, or you can pass away without a will. Either way, the process is going to have to go through a probate court. So for a judge to determine who the rightful owner and seller of that property is. And they like to submit it with the contract, because the court order will come to us and say, okay, you sell it for this amount, you can pay X amount in commissions, customary closing costs, up, you know, and it'll spell out and copy the contract so that we're authorized to do everything that we're going to do. We can't suddenly give a $2,000 credit to the buyer right at the last minute after the court order has been issued to us, because the court order says you're going to close it and you're going to close it like this. So we can't suddenly change, saying give a buyer credit at the last second if the court order hasn't got that spelled out in it. And of course, it is a lengthy process. Washoe County only has one probate judge for the whole county. So you can imagine that's kind of why it slows things down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen the pandemic cause it to be even slower, right? It's a process.
Washoe County did Story County, oddly enough, did it before Washoe, a Zoom, you know, court hearing. Mm-hmm. Did it just like we're doing this meeting, and Washoe County did do that finally.
Wow.
Yeah. Story County beat out Washoe County. Never thought I'd say those words.
Right. And you would suggest that the agent, when they get a copy of that prelim, review that prelim and reach out to you if there's any questions or anything like that that might come up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just, you know, we all learn by asking questions. Just pick up the phone or email, say, what the heck does that mean? Do I need to pay attention to that or not?
Right.
Well, and I think also with that, since we're talking about probates and ownership of the property, when you guys are doing your listings or putting the house up for sale, I guess just do your due diligence and make sure that that person is the owner of the property. Ask them what their marital status is. They could be married. We don't know these things. So the more information that you can gather up front for us is helpful. And then before you're even maybe going to open escrow, ask our customer service for a property profile so that we can look into the ownership, because sometimes you're going to go to a listing appointment and you've been talking to the husband the whole time, but he has a wife that's there that nobody knew about. So it's just little things like that. I feel like more information that you can gather up front is more helpful along the whole process.
And in regards to marital status, I know that both of you have had this experience where we've gone into escrow, it's almost ready to close time. You've got a buyer or a seller in front of you, and all of a sudden there's a ring on the finger. Mm-hmm. What happens with that when that happens, and how much of a problem can that be as far as closing on time?
It would only be a problem if the person that they got married to and they're selling has a judgment against them. You can't deed off. The wife just can't deed off and say, oh, well, yeah, this was his before I met him, I'm out. If she has a judgment against her. You can't deed out to avoid. Can't deed out to avoid that paying that judgment. So that's the only time it's really a problem at the last minute, when we're going to have to run that name. And of course, her name's going to be Jane Smith, isn't it? And then we're going to have a million issues that we need to get through to figure out whether our Jane Smith is the same as all the other Jane Smiths. So it could hold up an escrow, yeah, a lot. And it's confusing because in a court of law, that, they'll say the gentleman bought and owned that house before he married Jane. So in a court of law, it's his. But when we're issuing title insurance, one of the things that we insure against is community property interest. So we have to make sure that there isn't. And although it was two little tiny words, I do, when they were standing at the altar, it created a community property interest in that house. Most people commingle their funds. It's very difficult for, a husband and wife to say, everything is separated, that we'd have to prove that the wife never paid a house payment, or she didn't pay to get the windows fixed. She'll argue, well, I got the roof done. The house wouldn't be worth what it is if I hadn't got the windows repaired, mowed the lawn, whatever, as simple as that. But a spouse could make a claim on a property because it wouldn't be worth what it is without them. And say most people commingle their funds, have a joint checking account. There's no way to prove either way whether they did or not. So we just have to have them deed out and say, I'm out. This was his before I married him. I'm out, which is fine as long as she doesn't have a judgment against her.
Janine,
not so bad on a purchase.
Right, Ashley and Janine. Another issue is the lender not disclosing that the clients are married, and that can be a problem as well.
There's a huge disconnect between title and lending, because they don't consider that person a borrower. So to them, they're not borrowing the money. They don't care about that spouse. She's not borrowing the money. She's not signing anything. And you think, okay, fine, until we get the loan docs 5 minutes before the signing, and their deed of trust, their security document shows up that he's a married man, and she's going to sign that deed of trust. Their security document, even though she's not a borrower, when they put her name onto that security document, she becomes a buyer, because the deed from the seller to the buyer has to match how that lender prepared that security document, that deed of trust. Well, if the seller's deeding the property to two people, then that second person's now buying the house. They're a buyer. Now you've got a contract that buyer's never signed, no disclosures, nothing signed by this second buyer. So again, like Matt said, we need an addendum saying, hey, this person is aware that she's now joining in as a buyer. She's fully aware of all the terms and provisions of everything and agrees to everything to cover everybody's what. So yeah, the big disconnect, because a lender will tell you, you don't have to worry about it. She's not a borrower. But when they stick her name on that deed of trust, it becomes a problem. So you've got a contract out there with a buyer that hasn't signed a single thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Even though a lender will say to you, it doesn't matter, she's not borrowing, let us know, let escrow know. It does matter very much. It doesn't matter to the lender, but it's going to matter to the close of escrow date. So just call us and let us know.
And what about a wife or a husband that's out of country and you can't find them? We've had those.
Oh, we'll find them.
Yeah,
we have ways.
Yeah.
Then it could take a little while. Yeah. We do now have the remote online notary system, but the person signing, I think it has to be a U.S. citizen, doesn't it?
You have to have a social, not a citizen, just have to have a social. I think they have to provide
like credit card information. They have to really prove that they are who they are. And they have to have the equipment and the ability to go online with the notary. So it doesn't matter what country they're in. If they have the equipment, they have a social, and they're willing to provide some personal information to prove that they are who they are, and it's all through the remote online notary site, then we can do it that way.
Or the consulate, correct?
Well, the consulate, yeah,
Yes.
an embassy or consulate always, but you got to be cautious on that a little bit. Some consulates only do notaries on the third Thursday of the month. You know, others are open all day, every day. So that needs to be looked into to find the one that can assist that person the quickest.
Mhm. Eloisa had a question about, what about a divorce judgment and a quitclaim was signed by the seller, does not have a signed copy, and ex-wife is in a different country?
Well, let's do an addendum to extend the close date. First, a divorce judgment. So they've got a divorce decree. And a quitclaim was signed, but the seller doesn't have a signed copy. Well, somebody has that quitclaim deed, probably the attorney that assisted them with the divorce decree. Should have
Eloisa,
that.
you can unmute yourself and talk. Aston, you need to unmute.
Us?
No.
No,
Oh,
she does. She needs, Eloisa, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what we're doing right now is our client is going, they have a lawyer to find the ex-wife who's in the Philippines. But from what I was told by the family, she was refusing to go to the consulate to sign the papers because of COVID. So can you force her? Can we force her to send us a copy, or?
We can't force her to do anything. He'd have to go back to the judge and get a court order telling her she has to do it.
Right.
She got ordered by the court, or sometimes that power can be handed over to a clerk of the court to sign that document.
Okay, so the lawyer that they hired here, can they just get a hold of her and send her the papers, or?
Yeah, if they can find her, they can email the documents to her. She just has to get to a United States notary and
Okay.
FedEx it back, because they'll need the original back.
It's a messy divorce, so they're not even talking with each other.
But the divorce is final.
Yes,
So she's probably been ordered through that divorce decree to deed the property over to her husband. So it's a court-ordered issue. She needs to follow that law. And
Okay,
hiding in the
so-
Philippines won't change anything.
it won't change anything even though she's in a different country.
No, she say embassy, the remote online notary, or he'll have to go back to court and have the judge decree that a clerk can sign that deed.
Oh, okay,
Because the judge has already court ordered her to do it, and she's not doing it. They
yes,
probably won't arrest her for it, but so they'll go another route and get a clerk to sign it.
okay,
But it's probably going to cost him, but I'm sure that's part of her intention.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank
Good.
you.
And
Sorry,
you
say
ladies, you had some things that you wanted to cover. Some of them you've already covered, but
Yeah, I'm looking at, yes, prelims. Really, and there was another question. Oh, Alice
Yes.
came in with a question, didn't she? What to give us? Give it. So you start the escrow. What follow-up signed documents also get submitted during the transaction? Any addendum to the contract, we're going to need to know if we're changing the sales price, if we're giving
Credits.
we're
Adding people in the
it
title.
taking people off of title. Yeah, anything that's changing the terms of the transaction, we will need to know about. And then
And that's the change of the contract. Sorry to interject there, Janine, but
No, go for
in
it.
terms of the contract. So if somebody is saying, I want to credit my buyer $500, that's just for clarification, not something that needs to be, it's not part of the transaction. So you don't need an addendum if you're crediting. What you can do is send an email to title and let them know that you wish to do that. And then they will send amended commission instructions to be signed by me to approve that. So
if it's a credit to the buyer, the lender is going to want to know. If it's a loan transaction, they might want to see that in writing. If the credit's going to the buyer.
Yeah.
So obviously the main thing is try to get all this stuff done right away or as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last minute. One of my earlier questions, and since we're on timeline or prelims, was my time frame question of how long what's the process once somebody opens escrow with you that they should be receiving the preliminary title report?
It's going to depend on the complexity of the search itself. On average, I think we're about 5.
I would say we're 5 to 7 days.
Right
And
now,
I think that's important for everybody to understand as we're learning more about prelims and the importance of prelims. I mean, we're seeing some people say, I never received a prelim at all, period. Or it comes like 2 or 3 days before close of escrow. And look, guys, this is your responsibility to make sure that that prelim is there, that you read through it, that it's been ordered, that it's been received. You don't just expect people to be on top of it. It could be a complex situation like you're saying, and it may take a little bit of time to get that. So again, pay attention to that and don't just pawn it off and think, well, it's title's responsibility. No, it's all of us. We're working together as a team to accomplish the same goal, and that's to get the closing.
Yeah, and if you haven't received that within,
I'd say 10 days.
10 days outside, contact the escrow officer and say, what is going on? A title officer will call us if they're saying, hey, look, this is a tough search for us. Please let the clients know it's going to be a couple of weeks.
Right.
They'll let us know that. But if it's just in the stream and everything's just moving through normally, 5 to 7
we're at right now.
Right now, of course, we all know what Washoe County just went through, so that we were a little bit longer on prelims for a while there because the workload was just so heavy. But we're back to about 5 to 7. Yeah, contact your escrow person.
And business days, right, Janine and Ashley, because you have to make it very clear.
Yes.
5 to 7 business days, don't include weekends, because again, the title companies do not work weekends after 5 kind of thing. We're at 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. So when although I have to say we are working extra hours during this pandemic, but and doing what we can, but usually it's a 5 to 7. I usually say 5 to 8 business days is the average.
Yeah. At the outside right now.
Right. And depending on, like you said, the complexity of the property, because again, a subdivision, a single family residence in a tract subdivision might be easier than meets and bounds property that's outside of a tract. It's maybe off the grid. We've got to do more search. There's multiple things that might be a part of that. And then also commercial transactions can take longer as well because there's more complexity to those transactions. So, depending on property to property, not always, just basic 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 business days. Yeah. And depending on what's on that person, like IRS, talk about the a lot of people don't realize that IRS tax liens and judgments attached to property and person. Yes.
And you can purchase, if you have a child support lien or an IRS lien, you can purchase in Nevada. You just obviously take title subject to it. You can't sell or refinance without addressing that, but you can purchase, but you most certainly cannot sell.
No.
And right now, trying to get a demand out of the IRS is time consuming. It's lengthy.
And the one thing, wouldn't you say that when we're doing a prelim, we're uncovering things that most of the buyers and sellers don't realize we uncover, because they're looking at us as the perception, oh, that's where I sign my papers. But that's not really what we do. We insure title, we're insuring a title policy and title insurance for the new buyer, but we're going to uncover things that maybe the clients are uncomfortable with. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think sellers aren't always forthcoming on information with the listing agent not realizing that it will, we just had that
We had that,
situation,
yes.
didn't we?
Yes.
We kept asking for a statement of information. We couldn't clear a judgment from the sellers. We kept asking for the statement of information. We didn't get it. They finally come in and sign, so we have them sign it there. Well, of course, lo and behold, it was their judgment. They couldn't afford to sell the house. The attorney wouldn't budge, canceled.
And they never let their listing agent know.
They never communicated with their listing agent at all about that. And that's just heartbreaking for the buyer.
But what Janine said, they had just purchased that property less than a year prior, and they were able to buy it with that judgment. Probably were told that when you go to sell it, you have to take care of it, but I believe, were just trying to see if we would catch it, unfortunately. And yes, that's our job.
So I just want to rewind real quick back to somebody said, you know, what do we need to provide you? And you said, well, look, all addendums, like anything pertaining to the transaction we need to know. But I think it's also a nice touch and hopefully helpful to you guys when we're opening escrow. If you send all of your, if you're representing the seller, if you're sending all of the contact information for your seller, because they're going to need to contact them to order you know, the documents, HOA resale package, things like that. So, you know, make sure that they have the contact information. It seems like, and this is not, I haven't seen this happen with Tycor, but where there's closings and nobody seems to know what's going on. Like there was a closing that one of our agents had yesterday, and the title company had sent 3 different emails to the buyer saying, hey, it's going to be a mobile notary. Oh no, you can be here at 5 o'clock. When are you coming in to sign? Was the first one, and it was the closing day. And nobody knew what was going on. And so again, my point is, make sure you have everything lined up and you're in communication. We're all team members, again, accomplishing the same goal. So contact title and make sure that that signing is arranged, no matter how it's being done, so that everybody knows what's going on. So our timelines are correct, and, you know, people are in place to sign them, because lots of times, you know, title is very busy and escrow officers. So you know, you can't expect them to drop what they're doing to sign somebody because things have been dropped somewhere along the lines. Doesn't matter who's dropping it, we're all together. It gets dropped. So pay attention to it.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah.
Lauren has her hand up.
The other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, the offer now says whether or not the seller is a foreign person. But if you take that exclusive right to sell and they've marked that they are indeed a foreign person and may be subject to FERPTA, you should just let your escrow officer know then, when you're pre-opening escrow, to, you know, head off any possible headaches. You also should let them know what your commission, what the total commission is going to be. They don't see the exclusive right to sell. And if there's going to be any referrals paid out to anybody else, you know, referral programs, agents in other states, they need to know all of that, not the day before a close of escrow.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
I've never been guilty of that before, ever. Have I, Janine? Ever?
Never. Yeah, no, we don't know the listing agent's commission. It's removed, as Lauren said, from the contract for a reason. That's a private agreement between the listing agent and the seller. So we just need to know. And we won't let the selling agent know until after the close, when they see the closing statement, of course. But the selling agent shouldn't know that until after closing.
Is that going to change once they start publicizing commissions?
Feasible. It used to be on the contract years ago. It always had listing agent, selling agent, and then they determined, RSAR determined that they wanted that kept private. They didn't want the listing agent's commission to be used as a negotiation tool for repairs. So they took it out of there and made it just a private agreement. I don't know, Matt, are they thinking of putting it back on?
Yeah, there were talks. There's been lots of talks of Zillow, for instance, you know, publishing the commission. And I don't want to get into that big can of worms with their purchase of Showing Time and all of that right now. But but yeah, it is. There have been a lot of talks that there may be a change coming soon, where the listing agent or at least buyer's agent commission will be publicized.
Wow.
That would help us though. I mean,
Yeah.
I will say that we've had some issues with, we know one side of the commission, but we don't know the other. And that can be a frustration if we're not getting responses from the agent on what their commission is. I mean, we had one just the other day where 3 different emails were sent to the agent confirming what the listing agent commission was. They never responded. So we closed, and they're, now the seller is having to pay another 0.5%. Well, you got to communicate with us and tell us what's going on, because we don't have access to MLS. I think that's one of the things that people assume. So that's something to just be aware of, that we don't know everything that's going on. On the timelines and what an escrow officer needs, would you say that email address and phone numbers, both cell and home and business, is really important at the beginning of escrow?
Yes.
So that we can send out our start safe, correct?
And we're also, of course, conscious of private information. And so Tycor has what we call start safe system. So if you can give us your seller's email and cell phone, and your buyer's email and cell phone, we can just put that into our system and send all the payoff information to the seller. They can let us know their loan number, who they make those payments to. Chances are that at least the last 4 of their social, and they can do it all through the system that's secure, and that keeps you out of the picture. And then for the buyer, we can send the wiring instructions securely and find out, if they're married or whatever their situation may be. Currently, of course, right now with the seller, we need to know if they've requested a forbearance on their underlying loan because of COVID. They haven't been making any payments since March or April. We need to know those kind of things. But we've got this system where if you can just give us the email and the cell phone, we can take it from there for you guys and take that pressure and responsibility off of your shoulders and just go through this secure site that we have.
Now, I'm going to bring up something, and this is something that's new to Tycor, but through Start Safe, we can now accept earnest money deposit for single family residents. Vacant land earnest money, we're not allowed to. But for single family residents, we can. And so that's something to be aware of. So they can take a picture on both sides of their, just like, on the app side, when you're depositing into your Wells Fargo or your Bank of America, same thing for us. We send that Start Safe to them, and through their cell phone can take a picture of their earnest money deposit check on both sides, upload it into our system now. So that's going to be very helpful for those clients that can't drop the check off, or maybe they're at home, they've got COVID, who knows, right? So this will be definitely an advantage. Yeah, right, right. So something to consider. There's another reason why we need as many phone numbers and everything out there. Would you also agree, Janine and Ashley, that lender, who your lender is, who your what type of loan type it is, who's all the contact information we could possibly get out there?
The lender, the lender's going to reach out to us with the loan amount anyway, so that's not quite as important. It's nice to know, but not quite as important as that initial buyer and seller contact information.
And it has to be a cell phone. It can't be a landline, because it's going to send them a text verification.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what about home warranty? Having the home warranty information, of course, the real estate agent should be ordering that, correct?
But yeah, it should be ordering. And a lot of lenders like, every dollar amount and every payee on the closing disclosure before they'll send loan docs. So if you can get that ordered, or if you just want to say, oh, we'll be using Fidelity, I'll contact Annie, and then Annie will contact you to get all of the details. It's just something we don't know anything about. There's so many questions in regards to that. That's just square footage, you know, what kind of coverage they want. So yeah, the agents have to get that invoice to us. Yeah.
Alice is asking, how do you deal with clients who are not computer savvy?
And we'll go back to picking up the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement.
No. We don't judge. No. They
Yeah.
can still buy and sell. It's
Yes.
okay. We'll just do it via phone.
Yeah, and we can make a note in our system so that that start safe doesn't get sent out to them, or or if they're not comfortable filling it out, it'll keep sending
Send it.
them the information to do. But we've had clients call and say, I don't know how to figure this out. Please help me or stop this. So
We just need to know.
yeah,
The more information you know about the client, are they computer savvy, not savvy? Are they, you know, what are they willing to do? Because
Yeah.
you've gotten some pushback on questions we ask. And that's something that this is where you almost have to have client management. And I know Matt and Lauren know this too, is that client management and talking to that client and preparing them that the title company is going to be asking them certain questions, because that can be a real issue if they're like, I don't know why they're asking me that. Why do they, you know, this is none of their business. Well, it is our business, because we are going to find out things. We are going to need that information in order to close the transaction. And what most real estate agents and lenders and even the community, anyone out there, any buyer seller needs to know, we're under federal law to keep everything confidential. So that's the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. And that is an act back in 2008, where we have to be very confidential about anything that is you know, about that client. So they have to understand that we're going to be, you know, cautious about that information, because we do not want to leak that information out or you know, have anybody have access to that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else, ladies, that you had on your list?
no, but I think I want to mention something in regards to just gathering information. If you know that your client is going to require a mobile notary or is not going to be here for the signing, that's something that's helpful for us up front. That way we know going into it that we're going to need a mobile notary. And I also wanted to make a point. I've been asked a lot lately, oh, you guys do signings in our office? Yes, we do signings all day long. A few title companies still aren't doing in-person signings because of COVID, but we're absolutely doing them if the client wants that. They do not have to have a mobile notary to do the signing.
But we are being careful
Yeah.
with during this pandemic. It's by appointment only. We're, you know, trying to be more cautious, I think, for the clients, because we've even gotten feedback from clients saying, I don't feel comfortable, or, you know, I think the more communication we have, right, is better
Right. Yeah.
to know what their expectations are.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got requirements, of course, and unfortunately, just the signers. We're not having the mom and dad and grandma and the agent and the loan officer. No, just the signers, just the people who have to sign.
At this time, I mean, as things
Time.
change,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very fluid situation, and, you know, as things open up and more vaccines are done and things like that, we'll definitely be there again.
Yeah, it'll change a little bit.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. But for now, it's just keeping that condensed so that we're not possibly, you know, causing an issue for the buyer and seller. We're protecting them, you know. There is a question from Alice. She said, is escrow for land as same as home?
In theory, yes.
Sort of. I mean, from our perspective, I'm not sure if it's the same from an agent's perspective. There's still due diligence that a buyer will want to do if they're purchasing just land. Some inspections possibly up to the buyer. They might want a survey. They might want environmental issues dealt with. So even though it's a piece of land, sometimes it can be a little more intense with Matt, those utility letters of approval, you know, from utility companies that they'll let you do what you want to do. They let you put this house. Is it buildable? Can you subdivide? It can be a lot more intense than a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath in a subdivision. So it just depends on what your buyer is requiring he wants done, or what due diligence or inspection surveys, wants to see access easements, all of the water rights, road maintenance agreements. It depends how intense that buyer wants to get about that piece of property. So just because it's a piece of land, I don't think it's necessarily easier. It can be.
But the escrow process is pretty much the same
Escrow process
from our side of it.
Yeah.
And still asking, we're still going to get a prelim, we're still doing escrow instructions, we're still charging, you know, but I mean, there's still the same process side. It's just maybe the due diligence side of it from the agent side needs to be a little bit more extensive, right?
Yeah, feasible, again, depending on what the buyer wants to do.
Janine, what about,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Lauren.
This got me thinking about manufactured housing. And you know, what headaches, look at your faces.
Did that answer the question?
You know, there's a lot of similarities between land and residential as far as the escrow process goes. What about with manufactured housing? What differences might there be?
The main difference is when it's a manufactured home and it's staying a manufactured home, it's like a car, it's personal property. So we then have to have a value that we need to ask you for. What is the value of the land? Because that's all we're going to issue insurance on, is the real property. And what is the value of the home? So it's just a little technical issues for us, but we need to disclose, of course, to everybody that we're only insuring the land. So that's a car stuck on the property. And of course, manufactured housing, if you want to go for just to transfer it from the seller to the buyer, is document intense. But if you're going to convert it, that's a whole nother story.
What if it is converted? What if it's a manufactured home on a permanent foundation?
If it's on a permanent foundation and all the paperwork has been done and gone through manufactured housing division in Carson City, and they've let Washoe County, we'll assume, know that the taxes need to reflect as a house, it then becomes a single family residence. If all the documents have been done correctly, manufactured housing was happy, they tell the Washoe County treasurer, convert that tax bill to a single family dwelling. I think it causes some lender problems, but I can't answer those. But to us, it's the same. It's a single family dwelling. Once it's converted and the documentation is done properly, it's the same as a single family.
But don't assume, right? So you would recommend a property profile.
Yeah.
Look and see if the manufactured home has been converted or not. And because they may say, oh yeah, it's been converted. But again, the seller, a lot of times the property owners will say, yeah, it's been converted, but it never went through the process. Right. Or maybe the title company that did the work before didn't follow through. And it's really, I mean, we've seen that happen where, you know, it's been sitting there and nothing's been done. And then they're just assuming all this time it was.
Yeah, a lot of sellers will physically convert that home into a single family dwelling, have it fixed on the 8-point foundation, permanent, physically have converted it, but not paperwork converted it. Because when the paperwork convert it, it's going to change the taxes, and they're going to increase. So a lot of people don't complete that portion of it deliberately because they don't want the taxes to go up. They want to pay land and taxes and personal property taxes. The minute everybody knows it's a single family dwelling, the taxes are going to go up. So the physical conversion is different to the documentation conversion.
Right.
And manufactured housing is about, at best, a 90-day term. We send them something, 90 days later, they send it back. So it's not a quick process.
And you have to have everything perfect, or they'll send it back to you.
Yes.
Oh, cross your T's and dot your I's. And what's frustrating with manufactured housing is, you'll say A, B, C, and D, and they'll send it back and say, well, A, okay, redo A. And then you'll send it, and then 90 days later, they'll say, well, and B needs to be, it's like, could you not give me A, B, C, and D all at one time? They don't, they just hit one thing at a time. That's what makes it frustrating. And I've got 2 files sitting right here that it's been 6-8 months and we're still going back and forth.
Right. Any more questions from the audience?
I just wanted to remind everybody that besides doing the title work and working with this escrow officer and having your transaction go through, Ticor is here for a lot of other things as well. They've got a great marketing department, and so if you need information or are struggling on something, reach out to them. They've got a lot of great tools. They've got the Ticor, I'm gonna get this wrong. What do you want now?
Ticor Agent 1.
One,
yeah,
okay.
But it's going through a upgrade. There's so many great things on that program. And I was going to bring up net sheets, Matt, because I think a lot of real estate agents, if they want to get a net sheet right away and kind of see what our title and escrow fees are going to be, they can go to Ticor Agent 1 on their phone and get that information. But one of the things I was going to share is kind of some of the things that I see from even Janine and Ashley's side. Getting the final closing numbers and things like that is a process, especially when the lender is saying, hey, I need to know what the numbers are. We need to put this on the CD. It's not as easy as this. It's a process that our escrow officers and assistants have to do. So maybe Janine and Ashley can share a little bit about when you're getting numbers or getting numbers for a lender or for anybody. It's not as easy as just plugging it in.
And Janine, before you get into that, I just wanted to share an example of why that's so important. And I think we know we're in a very, very hot market right now, and a majority of listings are getting multiple offers. One of our agents came to me and said, I'm having an issue with this transaction. I said, well, what's the issue? And she said, well, we accepted this offer, but when he got his closing statement from title, he was appalled at how many fees were included in that, and he's not okay with his net total. I'm like, you didn't go over a net sheet with him? I think that's a huge mistake that people are making. When you're presenting offers, you're not just saying, well, here's the offer. You're giving them hopefully a net sheet so you can say, here's what this offer entails, and here's your total net on this offer. And on this one, here's your total net. So you absolutely need to be presenting these before your client accepts an offer. So there are not any, big issues that come up in the 11th hour.
And I think too, from your guys' perspective, estimated is really important. You don't know they haven't paid their taxes for a year and a half. You don't know they're way delinquent on their sewer bill. You don't know that they didn't tell you they entered into a forbearance on that underlying loan, and it's now $45,000 in interest that's owing. They forgot to tell you about the home equity line of credit that they have. There's another $500 out the window to close that out. So I think from your guys' perspective, estimated, no guarantees on at the end of the day what your net's really going to be. That's tough for you to try and do that for them. We can tell them what the basic fees are. We all know title, escrow, transfer tax, but until we get that title report, start getting the tax bills in, the sewer bills in, possibly waste management hasn't been paid for a while. It's really difficult to say until the day we close, really what that net's going to be.
And I think it's our responsibility to know if a client says, well, what other fees, could be included that I'm going to be paying for. You should have an understanding of what these fees are, how they're calculated, and, you should be able to give them an approximate number based upon that. So, again, that's why it's so important to know what all of these fees are, to look at these net sheets, even if they're anticipated.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And reading the closing statement too, that we provide with the final numbers, because again, if the buyer seller reviews this and they're ready to go, and the agent, if they can, more eyes are better than just one or two, right? So if for example, we missed a repair or we didn't have something in there, that's kind of the responsibility pretty much of everybody. It's not just title and escrow, because the escrow officer's putting in the numbers that they have. That's all they have. But if you didn't share with them, there's a repair allowance or there was this or that, we didn't know that. So again, if we close and later, 2 days later, they said, well, what about this repair? What about that? It's going to have to be paid outside of close. That's not the responsibility of the escrow company or title company to pay that, because if we didn't know and everybody looked at those closing statements and everybody said go, then anything that comes up after, it's the responsibility of the buyer, seller, or whoever was supposed to pay. So that's something to remember. That's a big issue sometimes.
With another item I'm seeing come up a lot is rent backs. That's really, really popular right now on this. Your faces.
Sorry.
Yeah, rent back is, a really big issue right now. We're offering it to sellers, and they're not being negotiated until the day of close, or I know that there are fees incurred if you guys have to hold the security deposit, so or some of those funds. So can you talk a little bit about rent backs?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, Lon. That's a good one. If we are being asked to close the transaction, but not disperse all the funds, then it changes the rules for us. So now we're being asked to hold money back. Go ahead and close, but don't disperse. We want you to hold that money. So it creates, dormant fund issues for us. We've got to keep files with money in them. We've got to report that we've closed a file, but we still have money left. We've got to keep it in a locked drawer. We've got to keep track of it, calendar it. And so we charge $150 if we're going to close something and not fully disperse. Who's going to pay that? Seller, buyer, split it? We just need to know. And again, if it's going to be the buyer, even if they're splitting it, the lender's going to want to know, because that's going to mess with their disclosure to the borrower. And then we got to start tracking it. And what happens is we then become almost like a property manager, which is obviously not what we're here to do. It's all wonderful as long as the seller leaves the house in pristine condition, wonderful. But when they don't, we get wrapped up in disputes that we have no right being in the middle of.
Good question.
The sooner we know, the better. But yeah, there's a $150 charge that needs to be disclosed as to who's paying for that, for us to close an escrow but not fully disperse it.
One of the things I wanted to share, and most real estate agents and even the consumer doesn't know, is we don't get paid our title and escrow fees until the deal closes. So all of us, kind of the same thing on commissions. You guys don't get paid. We don't get paid if a deal cancels. So something to think about too. We're all in it to win it and in it to close that transaction and make it happen. And I think a lot of times we need to share that. We don't, we could be putting a lot of time into a transaction just like you are. And, we're there for you through the whole entire process. So just something to think about too. We're there for you and there to close that transaction.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyone have any more questions? Comments? Did we cover a lot of information? Everybody happy? This could be
yes, thank you.
This could be a series, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it's probably more, yeah.
Yeah.
And we do plan on hosting more classes. Erin and I have chatted with Lauren, and we'd like to make this a series. And so we are hoping to host another class, Erin and I, in March, and then another one in April.
And we'd love your feedback on what topics, I'm sure you've shared with Lauren and Matt what you would like as far as topical, even if it's going over, reading a preliminary title report. You know, how do you read it? What are you looking at? What's important? How to do a net sheet, you know, all those things that we can help you with. And one of the things to share with you is please do your due diligence on your properties. Please don't take a listing without ordering a property profile from our property information department. You can easily get a property profile with docs. And also, I just want to share with you CC&Rs. You can have a buyer review CC&Rs. You can have that as part of your transaction and upload it to MLS as a document for them to review prior to offer. CC&Rs are documents that we can provide for free. There's no cost to CC&Rs, and it's very simple for us to send that to you. So if you want a property profile with CC&Rs and documents, just email propertyinfo@tycoretitle.com. So it's propertyinfo@tycoretitle.com. Easily it goes to our team. We have 4 people looking at those property profiles, and Mason and Savannah, Charmaine and I are always involved with property information as well. So always feel free to get that information and look at those documents, see who's really on title. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to Charmaine or myself to go over those documents to make sure that, you know, they're really truly the property owners. Yeah, can make a big difference for escrow if we're not dealing with the right people.
So if I need some information about the land that surrounds a property, I can reach out to you guys, and you guys could at least look into that property for me, which I would need because now I have the property listed. And so I'd love to pre-open it with you guys if he ends up selling this, but first I need to find out what the land is around his property because he's trying to buy it from Wild Creek Golf Course or Washoe. But so I would need that assistance. So again, this is the type of relationship, guys, that you need to form, is saying, look, I need your help, reach out to them. And then in return, you know, you send your escrow to them and it's a win-win for everybody. So thank you for all of your information. And we really, really appreciate you guys. And thank you everybody for being on today.
Thanks for your support, Matt. It's
Thank
really
you.
appreciated.
Thank
Yes.
you. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys,
Thank you.
all of you.